Welcome to the White Sniper. I am Charlie Storey, aka the Sniper Chief. Come with me on the ultimate journey to the best possible repertoire you can have with one GP. I hope you enjoyed that first section. Now we're going on to section 2. We're going to have a look at black occupies the centre and white's going to try and prevent it. Sections 1 to 6. Section 1, black centre, D takes C4, then queen E4 check. Section 2, a sniper Benoni. Section 3, a sniper Benoni with the reverse Bermuda triangle. Section 4 is going to be a reti into a white sniper. Section 5, a reti into a white sniper with 7 knight GE7. Whoa, what can I say? It's just very stealthy, the white sniper. Whoa, hey. Oh, and then we're going to have a look in section 6, a reverse samish. Whoa, reverse, symmetrical. It's all there in the white sniper. How confusing is it? Very confusing, I say. Anyway, let's crack on, soldier. We've got the white sniper to create, and we've got to turn you into a grandmaster. You understand the principles? You've got the principles nailed. Now let's get ready to turn you into a master. Welcome to disc 2 of the White Sniper Grandmaster Pack 2012 DVD. In disc 2 we're going to be looking at 6 different sections. First section in this game will be the black occupies the centre with D takes C4 and queen A4 check. Game 2 we're going to be looking at the sniper Benoni, and white prevents the Benoni with 2 knight to F3. What that means is 2 knight to F3 means black cannot play E5, and therefore is not allowed to build up a centre by inserting 2 knight F3 and then continuing on with the white sniper setup. Section 3 or game 3 is going to be the reversed Bermuda triangle. Of course, you must know the black Bermuda triangle from Everyman Chess Book 2011 to appreciate that. Section 4 is going to be the reti into the white sniper Benoni with 7E3. Section 5 is going to be the reti into the white sniper Benoni with 7 black plays knight GE7. And section 6 is going to be a reverse samish with the special move to look out for 17, move knight E to G5. That would be a reverse samish. So from the top, those 6 sections: black centre DC4, 2 sniper Benoni and white prevents Benoni with 2 knight F3. Section 3, reverse Bermuda triangle. Section 4, reti into white sniper Benoni with 7E3. Section 5, reti into white sniper Benoni with 7 black plays knight GE7. And section 6, reti into a reverse samish for 17 knight GE5. So let's get on to game 1, which is this one, and it's a black centre D takes C4. So what's going to happen here is white is going to allow black to take the centre. Now white can prevent this with the move 2 knight F3, and I'll be looking at that later. But let's just have a look what happens, and you can do this, just let black have the centre and nibble away at it, and let's have a look at some of the best options here. If white goes for a direct pure sniper after he's allowed black to get the centre with these 2 black central pawns, if black then takes up the challenge and captures the pawn, white simply plays queen A4 check, double attack, takes the pawn back, and then as you can see he's going to have an extra central pawn later to play with eventually, to give him some options of thrusting in the centre at the appropriate moment. And this is the whole idea of the white sniper. Use this pawn by getting a very tiny advantage, tinier than small advantage. Eventually you'll get your small advantage, and from your small advantage you'll get opportunities to convert that to a full point, all the while suppressing black from any realistic counterplay. That's how to win a game with a white sniper. You play in that exactly that manner. Tiny edge, small edge, keep the small edge for a while, even into the end game, convert that small edge into the full point. That is the perfect white sniper game, and that's what you're going to try and do every time you play the sniper every time you play the white sniper, which is different to the black sniper, because with the black sniper you're trying to equalise first and you're happy to try and struggle to get a level position, and because you've struggled to get that level position, there's still a great chance that you can draw. But with the white sniper, it is black who will always struggle to draw if you're playing it properly. And struggling to draw means there's a high percentage of those struggles will convert to win to whites, and hardly any will be losses for white once you've understood the system and got your bit of experience up. Don't expect to go out and play it straight away after you've learned all of these tapes. It's still going to take a fair few blitz games, it's going to take a fair few long games, but persevere with it, then you will have one of the most brilliant opening repertoires, which is nearly impossible to win against if you're playing it correctly and playing it well at a sort of a master level, as the elite practitioners such as Hickel, such as Lalich, such as Markowski have proved. And I'm certainly going to be trying to follow in those footsteps, and there's no reason why you cannot. But if you struggle early on, as you would with any opening when you're changing over, don't give up. Persevere. Persistence pays off. Remember that. Persevere. Persistence pays off. Right, anyway, on with the game. Queen takes c4. Nice strong position for white. He's got this extra central pawn. You know, I'm speaking to you like you're threatening to be masters now, because you should have had a big evolutionary jump in your abilities, having read the other sniper materials. I've made it easy for you to absorb, to turn you into decent players. I've emphasised at the key points. So you should be at least knocking on master level now, at least in the sniper variations within the sniper umbrella, within the sniper framework. Okay, you might struggle on other variations, but it should help. But here, if you've read all of the materials as I've recommended, you'll be knocking on round about the 2100 to 2200 mark, at least on those variations. So here we go. Bishop e6, a natural development move by black, of course. And now queen c2, knight d7, knight to f3, bishop to c5. Now here black has he's developed very well. You could argue you'd win the argument. The problem is this extra central pawn is going to count against him later on. Let's have a look how that happens. Castles. h6. Now h6, not such a grand move here. It's preventing knight g5. White couldn't really use correction. Black couldn't really get any initiative anyway. So this is a bit of a prophylactic move. And now in the game, which is between Pena Gomez versus Philippe, first division final from the Portugal Championship. Manuel was 24-30, and basically h6 was a sort of a second class move. Perhaps better was knight to e7, rather, just developing a piece naturally. Surprisingly though, e3 was played here, and that was a surprise for a 24-30 player, because he had a better option here. He could have played the surprising knight takes e5, and then obviously if knight takes e5 by black, queen takes c5 is very good for white. But after bishop takes f2 check, rook takes f2, knight takes e5, queen c3, white's doing quite well, because after f6, pawn to d4, and we've got our central pawns rolling again. And after knight g4, which is probably the reason he dismissed it, white can simply play rook f4 with the idea of embarrassing that knight with perhaps pawn to h3 in the very near future, or bishop to f3. And it's quite difficult for black to get back into this game, because if he, for example, plays pawn to f5, then black has to be careful about this diagonal down to g7. d5 could be in the air. Looks like a useful move, and then he's just going to play on g7 with a winning position. So it's a difficult position already. So knight takes e5 here was actually better than the game that we're going to look at, which was e3. Not a bad move, just the fact the opportunity wasn't capitalised on straight away. Anyway, I'm just going to sort of turbo through the rest of this game. After knight a3, knight f6, knight c4. That's a common idea by white, to play knight a3 and knight c4. It's quite irritating for black to meet. And now white uses his central pawn, and once the central pawn is in position, you can see the little bit of initiative that's happened and the white pieces have sprang to action. And white still wants to keep his little advantage in the centre, and these pieces are now in aggressive locations in the centre, and that means they're getting ready to thinking about attacking the black king directly now. Of course they can't think about that when they're back in on their own back row, which is on the starting positions obviously. So after knight b6, queen c3, black castles, and here this is what white has gained in the opening. He's just got a very small tiny edge, but his tiny edge is that his knight has put itself onto a square where it's a bit menacing, it's a bit useful, could be used in conjunction with other pieces to create a very direct attack on the king. There's also sacrifices in the air, with such as knight g7, knight h6, bishop h6 for black to continually be aware of. And this is all because the knight's come from the centre, it got to the centre, controlled that central square for a while, and then white gets the option to attack. And now he's taking that option by putting that knight on that beautiful square where it's going to sit with quite a bit of heavy attacking pressure. Looking at it with bit of a tempo on the e pawn, possibly in the near future. Of course you can't take it immediately because of the queen g7 checkmate. Black pops a piece in the centre with some initiative. Knight to g4, rook a d1. It's always good to get initiative in nearly all positions, but it's always better to release the initiative so you can get one piece of initiative, then another piece of initiative, and get 2 or 3 in a row. That often can finish games. Here white was just getting initiative to get pressure on the d file, and here we can see that knight on f5 is very useful. It's just sitting there, it's almost like an outpost. It's not quite an outpost because you can play g6 at some point, but if he plays it now, it could run into some problems. For example, pawn to h3 could happen, and there's some pressure against the black king being really weak and vulnerable after, for example, gf5 and h takes g4, and then the black king is very weak. So he's gone g6, and rather than play h3 he's gone knight d6. After bishop takes, rook takes, king g7, defending against rook takes g6 check there, of course. Again, more initiative, and that battery on the d file, very useful for white. Just enough to allow white to continue putting more pressure across the centre and weakening the black king. Triple battery on the d file now. Now you can suspect there could be a tactic hovering around here. White king gets away from any check, and the bishop comes in to attack the piece again, and it looks as though this is just winning a piece. And of course, having won the piece, it should be a trivial process from here. And just to show you how trivial it would have been, I'll just fly through the position. He secures his king, and that's it. So that was quite an interesting game in terms of, after queen a4 check, white simply recaptured the pawn with a imbalanced pawn structure that's in white's favour, because he's got the central pawn versus the c pawn, so that white has a d pawn, black has a c pawn, and on my Storey pawn scale that means white has gained a half-point advantage as a rule of thumb. And as we see the play unfold, we can see quite clearly this extra central pawn starts to make a contribution at move 12 here. And now after it's involved in the game. Now white still has a central pawn, so he has the central pawn versus the c pawn now, and then he gets the two bishops and the central pawn, and that converts into a situation where white gets this menacing knight on f5, and the menacing knight then allows pressure against the black king, which results in a weakening of the black king. And from here white simply turned up the pressure. He got control of the d file there. After he had control of the d file, he weakened the king further by forcing an f6 out of him, tripled up on the d file, put the pressure on, put his king safe, apply the pressure against the weak piece again to try and win the piece with f4 and covering knight g4, and passivity was nothing because the piece was lost and it was a trivial process. So what are we to say about that opening? If we just go back to queen a4 check, already white is going to get this annoying niggly tiny advantage. These sniper positions aren't just a tiny niggling advantage, they mean black hasn't any realistic counterplay, which is not the same as in e4 versus other openings or d4 versus other openings. They often have some good source of counterplay. Very often in these white sniper setups there's actually no counterplay if white just goes for the tiny edge all of the way. It's so annoying to play against when you're black. In fact, I believe one of the best ways to play with black is to play a sniper against a sniper. Of course you might think I'm biased, but having analysed it with the engines, I've come to that conclusion with quite a lot of fervour. Anyway, just to have a quick look at this position, just to be clear, white has two pieces developed and the extra central pawn at this point in time. Okay, you get some initiative there, and then you could say that's level on material, on development, and you're probably being more or less correct there. But white has the move, knight f3, put some pressure on, and so on. But anyway, that was just what I wanted to show you on black occupying the centre. Let me show you how he occupied the centre there. Move order becomes important in the first few moves here. Black has occupied the centre and white decides to play a c4. So I think, in my view, d takes c4 here, you can see white is going to get what he wants, which is a tiny advantage with minimal counterplay for black. So what's better than d takes c4? Well, perhaps black has to play d4, and that's going to come, we're going to have a look at that very soon. So let's get on with the next game. Okay, moving on to game 2 on disc 2, we're going to have a look at the sniper Benoni, and white prevents the Benoni with 2 knight f3. So first of all, let's have a look at how black plays when he gets this centre. We saw this centre and we saw it with c4, and we saw how when black took on c4, white got quite a comfortable position. But what if he goes d4? Now this is an interesting test of the white sniper setup, and in my opinion white gets good positions, and he still gets his chance to play for the win basically. So the first move I want to look at here in this position, let's call this the sniper Benoni centre. I want to have a look at pawn to e4. Now this is a very interesting move. It goes for a block centre, and it also, I think once the centre becomes blocked, that the white king eventually becomes safer than the black king. Now I can't exactly explain that, it's just my experience in playing these sorts of positions is what you have to rely on at this point. Feel free to question it later, but let's just go with it for the time being. Now after pawn c5, d3, we have what I called in the black sniper book, we have this triangle versus triangle centre, which was a Bermuda triangle I called it, this centre, but obviously it's with colours reversed, and it becomes more a bit of a strategical game to some extent, although there's quite a sort of simple plan here for white that I want to show you. After knight c6, in the game Ulrich Hearth 2108 versus Seizure Holm from Groningen from 2009. Seizure Holm's 2256 rated player. So I just want to show you how this game went. In the game he played knight e2. Did Ulrich Hearth, 2100, 150 points lower than his opponent. And after bishop d6 castles, knight g7, f4. I thought f4 initially was bad in this position when I initially went through the game and had a little bit of a look at it with the engines, but I later found it was a dilution position. Now you should know what a dilution position is. I've explained it in my other book, so I'm not going to go on about it here. So now we're going to see White's plan here. White's plan is to, in a nutshell, this is what he does, and I think eventually comes out with a better position. I'm just going to say White's moves. King h1, rook to g1, rook to g3, the other rook to g1. He can't do that yet, obviously, but when he's developed his other pieces, he's going to have a very solid setup there. Double up in the g file and good control in the centre. So I can't really see a way for black to equalise against this, despite the engines thinking it's okay for black. And we do get a number of dilution principles in that. Now let's have a look at how the play went in the game. Now I wouldn't recommend White's playing the great game because I thought it wasn't played accurately. However, this setup that I've looked at subsequently, which is showing you here with the green arrows of pretty much what to do, the simple framework of doubling on the g file with the rooks, is quite potent. So let me show you the actual game first. Knight g3, and White tried to clamp down on that. It was that move I thought was a little bit speculative, but the knight on e7 is a bit cramped, so the black queen on d8 can't really get to it, and so this is how it went. It turned out to be a bit of a massacre, really. I mean, black played it quite poorly, which was nice for White, but I couldn't recommend this way of playing for White, really. So let me just take it back, even though he won the game. Let me take it back to knight e2. Initially thought this was a little bit dubious, but this actual plan of f4 here, it's quite strong. This pawn setup is very strong because e5, there's not really, after bishop c7, knight g3 is a good move. Let's just have a quick look at knight d2 here rather than knight f3. I think knight d2 is a fascinating move, really. Let's just have a look at, I typed in some of the best moves for the engine here and a little bit of analysis, and I concluded that well, I'll just show you the resultant conclusion here. It become quite interesting at this point because obviously White wants to sacrifice on h5. This is a very sort of stodgy setup you will get by black to defend the g-file pressure, which I recommended earlier. And it was interesting here that it may be that black might be able to defend if he really goes all out for the defense, but if he tries to attack with a move such as moving that rook away at any point, then the sacrifice, which didn't work, let me just take it back. If I take it back to this point when the rook was on g8, now the sacrifice on h5 doesn't work. Let me show you why not. It's a bad move in this instance, the sacrifice, simply because black finds a way to defend. That rook on the g file was useful. So let me take it back to before that sacrifice, and we go bishop c1, no sacrifice. And now if black takes the rook away from the g file, I'm trying to get more. Now the sacrifice may work in the future. Let's have a look what happened. Bishop a3, pressurizing the pawn first, and now the sacrifice works, and it's clinical, and it's a win for White. So just one difference in the position once the rook's on the g file can make all of the difference. For example, after knight h5 takes, rook comes to g5, now comes to g7. You can see the power of the g file now, which would never have happened if one of the rooks had been exchanged. So that's just a good little important tip as I show you the final continuation of this game. Here you can see the pressure that the white pieces are about to bring to bear on the king and on the weak pieces in the black queen side, and that would be a win for white. Okay, so that was an interesting knight e2, but because if black keeps the rook on the g file, as I mentioned earlier, he might be able to draw. So rather than knight e2, my recommendation, knight f3 is my primary recommendation. You can still play knight e2, secondary recommendation, shall we say. So here the primary recommendation, again remember, you're going to, if you play this with regularity, players will book up on you. You've got to be a bit more flexible. You can't play the same one all the time. But here after knight f6 castles, bishop d6, here's a nice simple plan for white. Just simply put your knight on f5. Let's have a look what happens. Now black could play around with that knight there, but that knight's on a beautiful square. I can't look at every variation, but let's just have a look what happens if he takes on f5. This has happened time and again for me when I play this system colours reversed with the white sniper, when I'm playing the black sniper, even with an extra tempo, and I know as soon as I get this position it's practically a one game, even when I'm a tempo down playing it with black, if you like. For example, let's have a look how white would continue here. He just has a very straightforward plan. So black develops, and it's this g4 move. And now you can see, eventually, if white can stabilise his king, perhaps with king h1, he's going to be in a position to play h4 and g5. And these pawn threats eventually come in, and the engines don't understand, because in about 10 moves time there might be a winning attack. So this is a kind of a good system to play against the engines. So here, knight d2, heading for that beautiful square on e4, and I've just put some other moves in that will form a part of a good framework plan. Obviously bishop taking h6 at some point, pawn to h4, pawn to g5, king to h1, and again our doubling up on the g file. Now this is a powerful plan, and I don't actually see a way for black really to defend this. I think once this knight gets to f5 and we've got this sort of setup and the pieces flow through the centre as white's pieces could here, I think black is really struggling to hang on in there, and that is a very interesting way. Let me take you back to that interesting way and show it again. Knight f3, simple as that, with a simple idea. If black plays in this manner, like so, there's just one good idea. Obviously black might be able to do other things after knight h, even after knight f3, rather than knight f6. He can try other things, and in fact we'll have a look at other ways of how black deals with some different approaches to this sort of deployment by white later. Right, so I think that is as much as I want to look at on that section. I think it's about time we got on with the next section. Okay, in this section we're going to have a look at the snipe by Benoni, where as opposed to the Bermuda Triangle, we're going to have a look at white prevents the Benoni with 2 knight f3, and when he allows it. So in this position here we've allowed the Benoni setup, if you like. Of course knight c6 would probably be a Schmidt Benoni, reversed of course, but that's probably not so effective, knight c6 in this position. And I'm not actually going to cover it on this tape, but we are going to look at the one that gathers a bit more power for black in the centre, which is after d3, c5. Now this position can actually be avoided by white if he so chooses, and I'm going to look at that as soon as I finish that game. But let's have a look how white gets a tiny advantage, a very tiny advantage I must say, and one of the reasons why I've considered putting 2 knight f3 to stop black getting this structure. But it's still a playable position, I should point out. It's still a good position for white where he can still hope to win the full point. So at this juncture there's 2 reasonable moves for white. They are knight h3 or knight f3, but I'm just going to push knight f3, If you want to investigate knight h3, do it on your own time. After knight c6, again, white could play e4 here. That's an interesting move, transposing into the Sniper Benoni reverse Bermuda triangle, which is covered on this tape, of course. And after castles in this position, we have let's go for knight f6. Bishop d6 is an option there, but I'm going to look at knight f6. Many similar points behind it all. Now, in this game, e3 was played. Now, knight ft2 is I think it's a very good move, knight ft2, as bizarre as it looks. But I'm just going to play through this game very quickly first. This was between Giorgio Kejashvili versus Irina Krush. And I just want to quickly show you, before I go to the interesting move I wish to recommend, which is knight f to d2, I just want to show you this game quite quickly to show how you can win just by playing this in this traditional style of the Benoni reversed. So here b4, and Irina Krush played knight d7, which led to a win for black, a win for white by the Grandmaster, and knight d7 was a second class move. So just to be quite critical of the white position, let's have a look at a better move, bishop takes b4. Now, according to my analysis, this leads to a level endgame after takes here, check, and these knights somehow just sit solidly on these two squares and allow an approximate level endgame, although white still has a tiny bit and black has no prospects. But in my view, it's a level endgame, just about to get there now. There you go, there's an endgame. Tiniest of tiniest advantages for white, but I probably think that one is drawn more so than the other tiny edges that I push. So I'm going to take you back to just before bishop takes b4, which led to that probable drawn endgame. And at this point, after e takes d4, c takes, by the way, e takes d4. If e takes d4 was played there, then this position is quite good for white. White gets enough pressure in this position to be able to probably crank it up and go for the win. So I'll not go on too much in this position, but white's got a little bit of a bite basically. Okay, so I'm going back to after e3. Remember, I'm also going to come back later and look at knight fd2, but let's have a look at e3 again. E takes d4, and after c takes d4, bringing that wing pawn to the centre, b4, and bishop takes b4 led to that drawn ending. So let me take you back now to knight f to d2. So rather than e3, by the way, white has other moves here if you don't want to play my knight fd2 recommendation. So it's move 7, and there was 7 e3 going to open the e file. The 7 bishop g5 with the idea of knight a3, knight c2, a3 and b4, which I'm not going to push on here. There's 7 e4 going for a reverse Bermuda triangle, which I kind of recommend with a knight h4, knight f5 idea. And there's rook e1, I think is pushed by Dzhinjashvili with colours reversed. I'm not really sure about that one. I think there might be a flaw in Dzhinjashvili's research on that one, but basically I'm not going to tell you if this is or not, but I'm not going to promote it. And what I am going to say promote here is a rather bizarre move, knight fd2, and I'm going to give this 2 exclamation marks. One because it's quite a good move, and the other because it comes with a very interesting and complex, deep strategical idea, which I think acts as a dilution principle, which gives an advantage for white. Bit of a mouthful, that. Let's show you what I mean. Let's just give black some good moves here. Now, it's important you look at the bishop on c1 here. That is locked in. It didn't go to g5. It looks very passive. Now, watch what the plan is here. It's quite fascinating, this plan, which I've discovered myself actually, and I haven't really played in any games. I've kept it secret. This is quite an interesting secret. I've decided to release it on this tape because most of you are paying £60 for these tapes, and I think I should put some good juicy tidbits on. And this is an interesting, deep strategical idea that only those that have seen this tape will have access to, and it fights against the computer engines because I think it's a dilution principle of position as well. Anyway, bishop f5. Obviously black would like to play e4, rook e8 and then e4. White continues on, he wants to get b4 in. Black is not having any of that. And now, normally rook b1, not a bad idea, but I think just leads to a sort of a level position, rook b1. But after a5 in this position, this is my idea. Thanks for your support by buying these DVDs, by the way. It may help me to be able to afford to play in some pretty decent chess events in the future. Anyhow, pawn to a4 here. Now, I put some green on here to show you what white's plan is now. First of all, the plan is to make sure black can never play e4. Secondly, the plan is to anchor the knight at b5. This knight on c anchor on b5, where it just sits there, and its job is to be menacing, not doing anything in particular. What I mean by that is, it just sits there, it's a passive piece, but it's locked to queen side, and that's going to enable white to go for some sort of attack on the king side. Let me show you what I mean. Rook e8, f3. That's to prevent e4. If black plays e4, he has won the centre, his piece has come through the centre, and he's won. But now I'm just going to highlight these two pieces. They shouldn't be green, even though they're threatening the centre, they should actually be red. Why should they be red? Well, because this guy should be involved in the centre at some point, this pawn. And if he can't get involved, black has to unwind these pieces backwards and then get it in, by which time white will reorganise his forces and we have a decent position ready to attack himself. So this central attack is now redundant, it's useless, it just has to be reorganised. And the point, let me take it back to a4, this is being played to stop any queenside counterplay now. So white went a4, rook e8 to try and get e4, f3 to prevent it. And everybody plays this way. Obviously once word gets out on this tape it's going to change. But I had to put it on the tape. As beautiful a secret it was, I thought it only fair for all your support. If you bought me other materials, it was only right and proper I'll give you this idea. After queen d7, knight a3, so white has secured first of all the prevention of black playing e4, and now he's locked the queen side down. There's a little bit of fear initially for me to see if black could take on d3, but I don't think it is playable. If he does that, I think white has at least a small edge. And now all the black pieces start going backwards, and I'm just going to stop it there at pawn h3 and say this is a position for the future. And I think white is doing quite well here. White can look towards keeping a grip over that e4 square. He's locked down the queen side because of the strange positioning of both of these pieces. Oops, just take that back. The strange position of both of these pieces on f6 and g6. They're going to be targets for the pawns. But again, in the white sniper, you never rush your attack. You be tiny bit aggressive, that's all. Never overly aggressive. That's quite important in the white sniper. Unless, of course, you've got a direct tactical finish on, then you have to. You're on or bound to. So, in my opinion, I think even in this position, the engines say black is okay. I don't agree. I think white has great chances here. Certainly on human versus human, this is going to be a small edge leading on to a good attack against the black king at some point in the future. Or it's going to be a draw, one of those two. Either way, black is in for a whole load of pain, if you like. Okay, so I think if I just take it back to this a4 move, this is quite special, you need to remember this move. Let me take it back a step here. When black plays a5, white is committing to a massive long-term strategy after pawn to a4, and the idea is lock down the queen side, lock down e4 threats, get ready to get into position to organise a kingside attack. Even though white's not best placed at the moment for the central battle, the important thing is the knight at f6, which I'm touching with a hand there, and the bishop at f5, they're going to have to go backwards. Remember that, and you get your tempos back, and then you come back well with a better position. Incredible. But that's the beauty of the sniper, and dilution positions occur. Okay. Right, yes. So before I finish this section, if you don't want that position, or if perhaps there's something's found in the future to prevent my beautiful knight fd2 plan, let me show you how you can prevent black from getting this Benoni setup, if you like. So we'll take it from the top. After pawn to g3, now this is where the move order comes in quite important. Pawn to d5. Now of course if white had played 1c4, he could have taken on d5. But if white plays 1c4, there is other reasons why c4 shouldn't be played early, and I'll get around to those later in the discs. But let me tell you this, I believe g3 is a better move than c4, and I'll tell you that for now. I'll reveal it a little bit later. Okay, so after pawn to d5, if we reverse this position, this would be like black would be playing a sniper and white's played the queen pawn opening. Now, a way to prevent black playing e5 here, if you want to, if you don't want to allow those structure setups, if you just want to play something different, knight f3, which is a good move, develops a piece, hits the centre, but most importantly prevents pawn to e5. And let's just play some good moves here. Knight to f6. Now after knight f6, bishop g2, pawn to e6. Now we're getting into a potential Catalan system. White could, if he wants, play d4, and then we're getting into the realms of a Catalan if white then continues with c4, but he hasn't played that yet, which is quite interesting. And this is a different approach, and we're looking. Well, I'm going to have a look at this a bit later in the discs as well. This e6 approach. But for now, I just wanted to mention the possibility way back here, because the whole sniper system can morph into other sniper system setups. Is after if he goes the d5 move order. Rather than allowing black to have this sniper Benoni setup, you have the option of knight f3, which really clamps down on any active counterplay. And one other little snippet I'm going to give you here, I analysed this with a good friend of mine, and he mentioned there was a strong possibility here of d4, which I think was mentioned by, well, I'm not sure what was mentioned, but it was a little bit of an interesting test initially. But just to let you into the secret of how to refute it, the answer is pawn to c3, exclamation mark, with the point of if c5, bishop g2, knight c6. Now here's the good move, which refutes d4, and it's the only way to refute d4, by the way. It took a little bit of analysis to get this, and this is a very important move to refute this strange looking d5 to d4 plan, and it's the only way. Knight a3. Now you might be thinking, how does that refute the plan? And you'd be, fair enough if you thought that, but let's have a look why. Well, black supports the centre with e5, but this allows white to come into c4 with tempo. Black has to defend that pawn, realistically, and to do that he's probably going to have to do it with f6, and if he does that, once again there's a weakness appearing on that diagonal, which will ensure white gets a nice little bite in the long term. I'll leave you to figure out the plan from there, but suffice to say white has a couple of pieces development advantage, and he's got that diagonal has been weakened in the long term. Okay, So we've had a look at the Benoni there, and we've also had a look at how to prevent this Benoni style setup. Now I think it's time to go on to the next section. Okay, as it is a Grandmaster sniper pack, we have to touch a little bit on Knight F3 with the sniper coming a bit later. So let's have a look at a Knight F3 situation. After Knight F3, move 1, obviously that prevents E5, D5, C4. Obviously this is a very difficult way to get into a sniper. It's a bit like a sniper deferred, as has been sort of mentioned in the earlier sniper materials, the books and the black DVD master pack. Now this is going to transpose into a game we saw a couple of games ago. So it's simply transposed into a Benoni setup here, and here we have, after castles, of course black could play a couple of moves here. You could play Knight F6, which we're going to look at, Bishop D6, F6. You know, he's got a variety of moves, but the core ones which I have to look at is the ones we have to have a quick peek at. So back to Knight F6 and back to E3. But this was to show you that it can transpose via a Knight F3 move order with 2 C4, and then the field shadow happened. Now on top of that, I also want you to be aware of an interesting plan here in this position. First of all, after D takes F3, Bishop takes E3 is the best move. F takes E3, slightly better for black, in my opinion. Or correction, F takes E is level, but that's no advantage for white. It's just a complete level, no bite. I can't have that. But Bishop takes E3 continues the bite, which is the tiny small advantage. So after Bishop E7, Knight C3, Bishop F5, hitting this D pawn. The surprising move, which is good here, which I wasn't aware of that it was, is Knight D5. As far as I know, this is a novelty. And after Knight D5, the point is after Knight takes, and if Queen takes, obviously, well, it's not that obvious. Let me just show you what happens. Obviously the Queen's about to be discovered attacked by the G2 bishop, but after Knight D4, obviously Queen D7, Knight C6 could be played here, but Knight F5, and after Queen F5, White's just cranking the pressure up, and he's got the 2 bishops, and he's got his bite. He's got this queenside pressure, and he has the 2 bishops leading development, and that's enough to be pushing on for a potential win. So D takes E3. It's possible I could call that slightly dubious by black. Certainly not dubious if white plays F takes E3, but Bishop takes E3 is the correct response, and this Knight D5 again. Knight D5 in the sniper. Yeah, that Knight D5 in the sniper, very important to be aware of. Time and again pops into the position, even from different setups by black. Okay, let me take you back to the E3 move. So I'll just run you into it here. E3, and now Bishop D6. Now I just want to show you if E takes D4, C takes D4. By the way, E takes D4 after the bishop's gone to D6. Rook E1 check, and black's in a bit of a mess. So after takes here, black has this big strong Benoni centre, but there's a variation I want to show you that's a bit special. A3 going for B4, black doesn't want to allow that, but in doing so I just want to show you here, when black plays E5 stopping B4, he's made a long-term weakness at B6 and B5. That pawn, or any pawn, cannot oust any piece from there. That may or may not be useful later on. So bishop g5, bishop f5, hitting the d pawn. And this is what I wanted to show. There's a good move here by white, which leads to a good position for white. It just looks a bit odd. So I want to show you knight b d2. So the bishops just came out and hit the d pawn, and the knight says, well, go on, take it. And let's have a look what happens if black takes that pawn. It looks as though he can, but needs to a good position for white. Let's have a look why. So first of all, he's got his double attack at b7. So he actually takes the b7 pawn. A lot of people are afraid to grab these pawns, and rightly so. But in this instance, after queen c8, he takes the endgame on, and he's got a little bite in the endgame. For example, after bishop c5 here, white doesn't rush in, there's rook c1, and he gets a whole load of pressure. Knight h4, notice the attack on c6. Got all that pressure at c6. Black tries to mix it up, but after takes here, black has lost the exchange. And white has a great chance to go on to win that. So let me show you that move again. Just moving into it. Black played bishop f5, and surprisingly, white is all too happy to trade it for the b pawn, which normally I wouldn't recommend, but the initiative against the c6 piece has brought about an endgame, and then this little bit of initiative with c5 has enabled white to get quite a nice initiative there. And if black tried bishop b8, white would have to worry about knight h4, bishop takes c6, and pawn to b4, with two connected pass pawns steaming down the queen side, with the two tanks, or the two rooks, ready to get behind and support them. So that's a pretty interesting little snippet there. And so that was knight f3 early on, and then going into a sniper. Quite clever way of doing it. But it's nice to be aware of that, because knight f3 is a flexible move, and you can use it in conjunction with the white sniper, just as you can use d4 if you want to play a 1d4 and then play a sniper setup, which will often go into a Catalan. But there's other little move orders and nuances to confuse your opponents if they think they're all ready with preparation. Okay, you've got, as Bruce Lee would say, you've got to be flexible like bamboo cane when you're fighting in martial arts, and it's the same in chess. You can't just be too rigid in your approach. It's got to be a little bit flexible at master level. So, and this tape's about trying to push you up and develop some grandmaster opening repertoire. That's basically what it is. So let's get on with the next section. Okay, into section 5, I'm just going to stick with this e3 move, and we're going to have a look at a game between Mizuga versus the Resnayak. It's quite a low rated one. It's a 22-21 versus a 20-49, but there's some good points and ideas here. So first of all, let me show you how I got to this position with knight g7. As you saw in earlier games, we looked at e3 and knight f6. Let me just remind you how we got there. In this game, it came from a reti starting position, and then it went into, from the reti, it went into our sniper framework. And then e3 was played with bishop d6, but knight f6 wasn't played. Knight ge7. Not as aggressive attacking on the centre, but interesting in the sense it keeps this pawn's options available. Now let's have a look how Markowski dealt with this, and how Mizuga dealt with it. Both of them played e takes d4, both played cd4, knight d2, castles, a3, fair enough, a5, fair enough, and rook to b1 was played by Mizuga. Now I'm going to turbo through the rook b1, and then we're going to look at the alternative, Markowski's rook e1. So let's just have a look at rook b1. Mizuga went on to win with rook b1. Let's have a look how he did it. Stopping knight c5. Stopping knight g5. Now f5. Can send the knight backwards. And white took control of the white squares and went on to win a nice game from here, to be honest. After he got this position, there was a nice bit of control. Black never really threatened the white position, other than at that moment when the knight came to c5. And the pressure now really started to build on the weak pawn and the weak black pawn structure. Let's have a look how white finished the game off. Went very passive, black, and all white pieces were active, black pieces were fairly restricted. The kings, similarly, black's king was restricted to the centre, white's king was in the centre, and eventually won the centre pawn. The game went on to be an easy win. But let me just take you back to, taking it back to rook b1. We're going to take rook b1 back. So we just looked at rook b1, we're going to have a look at rook e1 instead, Markowski's preference. So he's really determined not to let black pawn come to e4. Knight g6 was played by Savchenko, rated 2570, and queen c2. This indirectly defends against e4 as well. Rook b1 is in. And now Markowski, he quite likes the idea of, if you remember earlier in one of the games I showed you, a5 weakened these pawns, with a correction, weakened the squares at b6 and b5. And here the queen pressurizes one of those weak squares. This is Markowski's approach. And Savchenko didn't like the look of that queen there. And then this harassing move at queen b3 just induced a little weakness. But now the a6 and the c6 squares are weakened further. And Markowski now even played h4. And at this point it's a little bit unclear as far as I can see. But it's definitely a good winning try. You know, it's increasing the winning dynamic probably for both sides. It's quite a messy position. Markowski does go on to win this. Let's have a look how he does it. So it's a bit too complex to analyse really in a short period of time. I'm just showing you the main ideas that Markowski used to defeat his opponent, who was a grandmaster. So he sacked the b pawn. He's going to get a bit of long-term pressure there. Of course Markowski's happy to trade a b pawn for an e pawn. And this queen b3 move again, another feature as common as knight d5. Well, not quite as common, but as close as knight d5 in sniper games, so always be mindful of it. So here you could argue white has the better pawn structure. So what does black have to compensate for the worse pawn structure? Well, to be honest, I can't really see. I don't think he has any. You could argue here that the knight on a5 is also out on the rim, therefore dim, as they say. And black's knight on e4 is worth a bishop. In fact, it trades for itself for a bishop. Of course, at master level, bishops are better than knights, unless the knights are really doing well in the centre and the bishops are not. And Markowski used the two bishops to get to the c pawn, and with that the win became highly probable. Let's see how he finished his opponent off. Looks a bit risky allowing that queen e1 check, but black didn't even fancy it. And the threat of g7 checkmate was looking quite difficult to meet now. And the white squares have collapsed. And the C pawn came down and won. So let me take you back to Markowski's preference. He preferred rook e1 immediately, as opposed to the rook b1 game that we saw. And just turboing through this, probed the queen side a bit, sacrificed a b for an e pawn, or traded, I should say, a b for an e pawn, and eventually won the central battle. And we know what happens when a sniper practitioner wins the central battle. So that concludes the look at the main sniper Benoni. The next game we're going to have a look at is going to be a reverse Samish. Keep an eye out for a very special move I found in that game. 17 on move 17, knight e to g5. Okay, here we are, disc 2, section 6. We're going to have a look at a reversed Samish. See how black sets these pieces up and how the extra move makes a difference for white in this scenario. The interesting thing about this position, of course, it could have come via a pure sniper move order, or an English, or a couple of other ways it could have come about. But the way it did come about again was via the ready. Now it's important again that you're aware of this, but this could just as easily come about via a pure sniper had black chosen that setup. Okay, so c5, g3, and we have castles here, d5, d3, f6. So this of course this position could have come about via a variety of move orders, and our sniper structure could have also come about via a variety of move orders, and now black is playing to get this space advantage in the centre. Now this is an interesting game between El Kerr 2270 rated and Haman 2375 rated. The lower rated player, who's white, wins this game. And I'm quickly going to turbo through the game just so that you have a feel for how to play against the Samish. Nice way to play against it. So again, we're seeing this e3 idea, which we've seen, which was useful in the sniper Benoni. And there's our a5 to suppress the b4 move again. And this is very many similarities to that Benoni setup before. Okay, so of course, as you've seen in all the earlier sniper material, which of course is available from charliechess.com if you haven't seen it. If you're coming in, if you're already a master, if you're looking at this stuff, by all means get that. If you want to learn how to play this with black, it's still useful for the masters as well as it is for sort of 1400s to 2000 rated. So you know, it's a very big breakthrough book in theory was the Black Sniper, so it's well worth getting those materials if you can. You can download the DVDs, or you can actually buy the physical DVDs via my eBay shop or via my charliechess.com site. I don't mainly distribute them through mainstream channels. I just keep any profits I make for myself basically, so I do everything in-house. So by all means go to charliechess.com and get these excellent videos and training materials on the sniper. I've worked very hard on it, and I've created a very special suite of training materials on the sniper for both the Black Sniper and the White Sniper, which I share with everybody who gets any of the products, so by all means get them. Anyway, this knight c8 move, weak move. Very rarely is it good to put a piece on the back row, very rarely is it good to put a knight on the back row. There's normally some penalty system. Okay, so this game Here we have this idea of a3 b4, which increases black's pawn scale to some extent. However, gives black a straightforward area of counterplay, which is correction, it gives white this straightforward counterplay down the b file. If colours were reversed, it would be black, of course. Anyway, after knight a5 and queen b2, rook a6, quite a flexible waiting move and defensive move, defending the third rank. Maybe rook b6 is in the air at some point as well, and it gets the rook off the long diagonal, which is useful. However, after rook eb1, I would argue level position. However, I've just been praising this rook a6 move. I'm just going to let you have a think about this. Just going to insert a little training moment for you. I want you to spend a couple of minutes on this position. I'm just going to highlight some things for you here while you're looking at it. It's actually white to play and win. Can you believe that? So let's have a look at what the move is. No, let's not. I'm going to make you stew a bit longer. If you are a good chess player, you could possibly miss this move. But if you're a good chess player and I've told you there's a win here, you should be able to find it. It might take about 10 minutes. I just want to see if you can do it in a few minutes. Let's just, while you're looking for it, just look for white to play and win here. Just talk about some other things that aren't really connected to the win. From this same-ish, black has only 2 pawn islands, white has 3 pawn islands. So white has a disadvantage in pawn islands and on pawn scale. If you look at the A versus the B pawn, and black has an extra central pawn. Now the only way to offset the centre, in terms of if you're not doing as well in the centre on pawn mass, is through piece mobility. And here white has a chance to activate all of his pieces into mobile operations, which will lead to a great position for white. And it's probably got something to do with that knight on c8. The knight on c8 is allowing this tactic indirectly by not directly contributing to the defense. Knights on the rim, certainly knights on the back row, don't let the position flow for whoever's knight is there. And the knight in the back row in this instance is contributing to, by not defending some key squares, allows white's next move. I'm keeping you in suspense deliberately, and I'm talking just enough so you might be able to figure out the response. Okay, other things I would like to talk about in this position is the safety of the king. The safer king here, paramount importance in any position. White king is safer. It's got pieces surrounding it. Black king is currently a victim of an X-ray check by the rook on e1. X-ray check isn't a direct force, but it's an indirect force which can reveal very important attacking considerations later. Within a move or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, 8 moves, you must be mindful of X-ray checks always. Okay, so many of you are probably looking at all sorts of things here, and this is hard in this position because there's many different moves which you might think lead to an edge, but there's only one that leads to the clear advantage, and it's a bit special. And here we go. I'm going to play it now. It's very important you're aware of this, otherwise black would have equalised. You probably got it. If you want to try and continue to do it, press pause now and look for it, because I'm going to show you in 2 seconds. Right, here we go. Let's keep you in the suspense a little bit longer. Here we go then. What about this knight to here or this knight to there? There's only one of them which works. Which one is it? remember, in the game, rook eb1 was played, and white still went on to win. However, a much better move than rook eb1 would have been knight e to g5. Hooray! Give yourself a pat on your back if you got that. You probably got a great chance of being a grand master if you persevere and study 20 hours a week at least. Right, okay, here we go. After knight g5, what happens if he takes the knight in g5? Well, in comes the initiative, and all of the white pieces that remain get involved in the attack. So knight e5, queen c7, queen b5 check. So that looks a little bit dangerous. What happens with king d8 to get out of the x-ray attack by the rook? Well, surprisingly, sniper bishop comes in with bishop takes b7. Now if knight takes b7, queen takes b7. If queen takes b7, bishop takes a5 check. So rook b6. This allows queen takes a5, and after rook takes b7, the easiest way to win here for white is to play queen to a8, and that knight on e5 is eyeing up a c6 check, and bishop a5 is also in the air, and it's pretty bad from there on in, and we can safely say that white's going to win that position. Okay, so in the game, rook eb1, this stereotypical b-file pressure move was played, but much better was knight eg5, and then after fg5, by the way here, if in the game knight e5 was played there, but after fg5, if instead of fg5, rook b6 was played, let's just have a look how play would have continued here. This looks to be the better defence, and many of you may have dismissed the variation because of this, so let's have a quick look. Queen takes b6, queen sacrifice, takes on b6, takes on a5, hitting the piece on b6 still. If it goes backwards, guess what happens? Same move, well, similar idea, but knight takes e5, with the idea of activating the x-ray check. If the check turns from an x-ray to a direct check or a direct pin, it's major power. So let's have a look at how 17 knight eg5 came about again. So white was on the verge of getting his knight driven backwards, but it was just in time to play knight eg5. So let's have a look how we got to knight eg5 again. Let's just take it back slowly, taking it back, and so it came about via, let's go right to the top back on this one. So after knight f3, it wasn't a sniper to start with, it was a ready, but it transposed into a sniper style setup there with c4, but through this order it's allowed this Benoni, which you may or may not want to have allowed. That's part of the skill in chess, of allowing and disallowing certain variations of a certain style of play from your opponent at the master levels. And the knight went backwards, and that was a bit of a factor in allowing this surprising knight eg5 move. I'm just showing you the entire game here, which was played between her. I'll come back to the knight eg5 in a moment. I'll just show you how this game panned out. It's just an a-pawn queens. Taking you right back to move 17 knight eg5 now. I'll lead you into that. So we had this position in the game. Obviously rook b1 occurred, but knight eg5. And black, because he spent time manoeuvring this knight, the king has put itself in a little bit of a danger, and that's allowed this knight move. Okay, and that pretty much concludes my disc 2. So I hope you're enjoying the series so far. please make sure that you subscribe to my Sniper Monthly Update. It's just £3 per month, and it gives you all past articles on there as well, and there's an update every month. So even if you just subscribe for 1 month, you're getting great value. But of course I would prefer you paid £20 for the year and get all the subsequent updates, which will keep you abreast of all of the latest black sniper stuff, and I occasionally put some white sniper stuff on there as well. So I guess I will go and make myself a cup of tea now and have a bit of a break, and I'll see you ready for disc 3. So I'll see you soon.